In a single, unguarded second, our connection deepened into something unexpected, leaving a mark neither of us could erase. The solar blazed its mild shimmering over the pool's surface, developing a quiet, captivating brilliance. I closed my eyes, savoring the warm temperature that unfolded through me, filling the rare, tranquil silence that enveloped the outside. With my companion away on a commercial enterprise experience, the vacancy of the residence felt liberating, a solitude I hadn't found out I craved until that very moment. Simply as I was getting comfortable savoring the solitude, I heard the unmistakable sound of the gate creaking open. I squinted, protective my eyes from the sun, and there he was, my nephew, Caleb, standing at the brink of the pool, a playful grin plastered throughout his face. "Aunt Wish, I am not interrupting," he said, already slipping out of his sandals and pulling his tea blouse over his head, revealing the athletic construct he'd grown into. It hit me then that Caleb was not the kid who used to go to each summer. He had grown up, and it felt atypical to see him, now a confident young man's status there with that mischievous smile. I remembered so properly. "Did not count on you returned so soon. Were not you alleged to be out with buddies?" I requested a chunk. Amazed, he shrugged, grinning. "Yeah, I was. But matters did not exercise session as planned. Figured I'd come returned and hang out here. Wish you don't mind." Earlier than I may want to answer, he dove into the water with a sleek splash. I watched as he surfaced nearby, shaking his head to clear his moist hair, a huge smile stretching throughout his face. Man, I forgot how proper it feels to swim right here. Caleb had spent infinite summers at our house developing up, but this summer season felt one of a kind. He turned into older now, sporting an air of maturity I hadn't seen before. There has been something within the way he held himself, the way he spoke. He'd changed, and it turned into each interesting and slightly disconcerting. "Satisfied to look, the pool hasn't misplaced its charm," I stated, looking to preserve matters light. "You understand. It is usually simply me out here in recent times. Kinda exceptional to have someone to swim with." He nodded, floating beside me, his eyes reflecting the brilliant afternoon daylight. "I constantly cherished it here, Aunt. It's the handiest area. I'm able to without a doubt relax." We swam in silence for a while, the water cool and clean in comparison to the warmth that surrounded us. However, the silence wasn't empty. It changed into charged with something I couldn't quite place my finger on. We drifted near every different, once in a while bumping shoulders inside the pool's natural currents. It turned into comforting, but also peculiar, like we had been rediscovering our bond in a manner we hadn't before. So, I started breaking the silence. "How's life been treating you?" Closing, I checked. "You have been jogging around with that sports group of yours, and talking about university need to be retaining you busy." He laughed, a deep, wealthy sound that caught me off shield. "Yeah, it has been a whirlwind, training, studies, trying to determine out what I need to do with my life. It appears like there is continually something new to fear about." I nodded. "Inform me about it." "Looks like yesterday, you had been a kid splashing around in this pool, and now you are coping with grown-up stuff. Time flies." Caleb leaned, returned in opposition to the threshold, his arm brushing lightly towards mine as he looked over at me. "You make it sound like I am all grown up. And still appears like I'm figuring matters out." Half of the time there has been a pause, and in that moment, I stuck something in his gaze, a glance that became greater than just the informal warmth we commonly shared. It became diffused, nearly imperceptible, but it made my pulse quicken, just the tiniest bit. "Well, I have been through sufficient to understand that figuring things out by no means in reality ends," I answered with a smile, trying to shake off the sensation. "Doesn't rely how old you get. Lifestyles has a humorous manner of preserving you in your feet." He smiled, however. There has been something almost considerate in his expression as he watched me. "You are probably right, but at the least I have you round to hold me grounded." His words have been tender, honest, and the way he said them stuck me off. "Protect." Hello. That's what odds are for, I replied, aiming to lighten the mood. But do not pass relying on me too much. You may need to begin making your own errors finally. Caleb chuckled, rolling his eyes. Oh, agree with me. I am making masses of these already. He leaned in his arm, brushing mine once more. A informal gesture that by some means felt extraordinary. I may want to experience the warm temperature radiating from him. The closeness of our shoulders as we sat facet with the aid of aspect in the cool water like what I asked, hoping to steer the communique somewhere much less ambiguous. Well, he started out, pausing as though selecting his phrases carefully. There may be stuff. He glanced over at me with a faint smile, a glance that turned into both playful and earnest, making it difficult to inform if he was joking or confiding. Oh, come on. Do not pass all mysterious on me now, I teased, nudging his shoulder lightly. You already know. I'm right here if you need advice on anything for a between us. The daylight started out to decrease, casting a tender amber glow over the pool. And for a moment, I forgot approximately the entirety else. It became just the two people, stuck in a second, that felt timeless. However, because the solar began to sink, casting longer shadows over the water, I could not assist, however, experience a sense of anticipation striking inside the air, like we were on the edge of something I could not pretty outline. The subsequent morning, I found myself status on the kitchen counter, my thoughts still replaying fragments of the day before. There has been something approximately Caleb's visit that lingered, an aftertaste of a connection that became both familiar and unexpected. It became difficult to provide an explanation for, even to myself. However, I could not shake the sensation. Caleb walked in hair damp from a bath, a casual grin on his face, as he grabbed a pitcher of water. Morning, Aunt, he said, his voice smooth and heat. He looked greater comfy than he had the previous day, and that I noticed he'd taken his time getting equipped. His movements slower, more comfortable. Morning, I responded, retaining my tone casual, as I set down my espresso sleep. Well, yeah, I did, he stated, pausing to look at me. Something approximately this vicinity just makes me feel comfortable. I smiled, nodding in settlement. It's proper to have a damage. Occasionally, he checked out me with a thoughtful expression, like he become considering my phrases. But, as opposed to responding, he simply nodded, letting the silence cling within the air. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence, as an alternative. It felt charged, like there was something left unsaid among us. without any other word. He grabbed a towel and made his way closer to the pool. I watched him cross, feeling ordinary pulled to observe him. It became as if part of me wanted to select up wherein we had left off the previous day, to see if there was something more at the back of the anxiety that had simmered between us. I wandered out to the pool a couple of minutes later, my coffee in hand, seeking to preserve things mild. But as soon as I stepped outside, I saw him floating within the water, eyes closed, his frame relaxed as he drifted aimlessly. I hesitated for a second, then sat down on the pool's aspect, dangling my toes within the water. Caleb opened his eyes, looking over at me with a lazy grin, could not withstand becoming a member of me again. I chuckled, splashing a little water in his root. Someone's were given to ensure you don't drown. I joked. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. I'm quite sure I can control. However, thank you for looking out for me. He drifted closer, the water rippling around him as he neared me, his eyes looking mine. There has been something in his gaze, something that made my heart race only a little quicker. I imply, someone's were given to preserve an eye on you, I replied, attempting to maintain my tone light, though the words felt heavier than I intended. For a second, he just checked out me, the sunlight glinting off the water as his expression softened. You have always been there for me, have not you? He stated, his voice quieter than before, even when matters were not smooth. I used to be shocked through the sincerity in his voice. Well, yeah, that's what family's for, I replied, feeling a bit self-aware beneath his excessive gaze. He nodded, still watching me, a look of gratitude, mingling with something else, something I could not. Pretty location. I appreciated. And extra than you recognize. The phrases hung between us, full of a weight that regarded to deepen with each passing second. Before I may want to respond, he reached out his hand, brushing against mine in a manner that felt each informal and deliberate. It changed into a small gesture, however it sent a jolt through me, and I discovered myself looking down at our fingers, his hands lingering in opposition to mine. I quick pulled my hand away, clearing my throat and strived to interrupt the anxiety. Properly, besides, you realize you are usually welcome here. That is your home too, Caleb the first stated, trying to sound composed. Caleb smiled. However, there was a flicker of disappointment in his eyes. Thank you, Aunt. It wayloads. We sat there in silence, the air thick, with an unstated power that neither folk seemed willing to well known. It turned into as if we had been both on the threshold of something, but neither of us knew the way to take that next step. Finally, Caleb broke the silence. I think I'm going to head out for a chunk, he said, getting out of the pool and grabbing a towel. Simply want to clean my head. I nodded, looking to ignore the extraordinary pang I felt as he walked away. Positive. Take your time. I'll be right here in case you need me. He flashed me a quick smile earlier, then disappearing via the gate, leaving me on my own with my mind. I couldn't assist, however, surprise what had modified between us. There has been a familiarity, sure, but additionally, abnormal new distance, a shift that left me feeling off balance. The day wore on, and as night fell, I heard the front door open, and in walked Caleb. He seemed thoughtful, nearly pensive, as he set his keys at the counter and made his way into the residing room. I joined him a couple of minutes later, sensing that he wished to talk. We sat in the quiet for a moment. Earlier than he subsequently spoke, his voice smooth and unsure. Aunt, can I ask you something? Of Path? I answered, feeling a surprising tension settle over us. He checked out me, his expression critical. Do you ever experience like you're lacking something, like there's something on your lifestyles? This is just not quite there. The query caught me off guard, and that I took a second to keep in mind my answer. Yeah, occasionally, I think everybody feels that manner. Sooner or later, it is part of identifying who you're. I think he nodded, his gaze transferring to the floor. I do not know currently. I sense like I am chasing something, but I don't even recognize what it's for. It's complicated. There was a vulnerability in his voice that made my heart pain. I wanted to reassure him, to inform him that he'd parent it out sooner or later. However, I knew that would not make his confusion leave. Alternatively, I placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, hoping that my presence alone could be enough. Anything it is, you'll discover it, I said quietly. Every now and then, it simply takes a bit time. He seemed up at me, his eyes full of gratitude, and for a moment, I felt the load of something unstated between us. There was a closeness, a connection that felt deeper than circle of relatives, and I could not deny that it stirred something inner me. Because the nighttime wore on, we pointed out the whole lot, and not anything. Our communique flowing effortlessly, like we were rediscovering each different after years of distance. However, beneath the floor, I could sense a tension building, a spark that neither people regarded willing to ignite. In the end, Caleb yawned, stretching his arms, as he leaned against the couch. "Bet it's time to name it a night," he stated, giving me a sleepy smile. I nodded, feeling an unusual reluctance to let the night end. "Yeah, I assume." So he stood up, pausing for a moment as he appeared down at me. "Thanks, Aunt, for the whole lot. It wayloads to me." I looked up at him, a tender smile on my face. Each time. "Caleb, you recognize that." He lingered for a second longer, his gaze conserving mine earlier than he ultimately grew to become, and headed closer to his room. As he walked away, I felt a pang of something, a longing possibly, or a experience of unfinished business. I stayed on the sofa, gazing the empty doorway lengthy after he'd long gone. There has been something approximately the day about our communique that had left me feeling each comforted and unsettled. It was as though we have been on the point of something, but neither folks knew the way to take that subsequent step. I took a deep breath, searching for the proper words. "Perhaps we are each just feeling a little misplaced," I responded, though even as I stated it, I knew it was most.
Are you sleeping? Are you sleeping, Brother John? Brother John. Morning bells are ringing. Morning bells are ringing. Ding dang dong.
to see something turned into occurring among us. However, my frame wasn't listening slowly, tentatively. I leaned in our lips, brushing in the softest, most fleeting kiss, as if checking out the waters, seeing if this connection we felt changed into real. The kiss became gentle, nearly hesitant, a quiet acknowledgement of the whole lot that had been building between us. It felt herbal, like the solution to a query I hadn't even recognized. I was asking, and as our lips met, I felt the experience of calm settle over me, a sense that this was exactly in which I used to be imagined to be. While we eventually pulled again, we stood there, our faces inches aside, each of us catching our breath. He checked out me, his expression, a mixture of wonder and alleviation, as if he hadn't quite anticipated me to go through with it. He began, his voice soft, nearly uncertain. I wasn't certain. I smiled, feeling a warm temperature spread through me. Neither did I, but I assume we both know this has been there for a while now. We stood there in silence, letting the fact of what had just took place sink in. There has been a brand new information between us, one that transcended phrases, an unstated connection that appeared to settle in the air around us. It became both exhilarating and terrifying. Understanding that we might cross a line we may want to never uncross. After a moment, he reached for my hand, his palms intertwining with mine in a mild, comforting grip. We didn't want to mention something. The silence becomes sufficient, a shared acknowledgement of the shift that had taken vicinity between us. We subsequently made our way return to the residence, each step filled with a quiet depth, a brand new observed closeness that felt both acquainted and entirely new. This sector felt specific in some way, as though the whole thing had shifted, and we had been now part of a story we could not quite are expecting. As we walked into the dimly lit hallway, he turned to me, a smooth smile on his face, one that held a combination of wish and uncertainty. And that I don't know what takes place subsequent. However, I do not want this to be the end. I reached out, brushing a hand gently alongside his cheek, my coronary heart pounding in my chest. Neither do I, Caleb. However, we should be cautious to parent out wherein we're headed. He nodded, his gaze packed with dedication. I am willing to attempt if you are. For a moment, we actually looked at each people feeling the weight of the moment, the beginning of something we could not absolutely understand. And in that quiet, I found out that regardless of how complicated matters have become, this connection changed into something I didn't want to allow pass of. As we stood there, the space between us melting away, he leaned in over again, our lips assembly in a gentle, lingering kiss. We couldn't manage ourselves. The entirety that occurred among us felt inevitable. Our bodies met, wrapping round every other, melting into the feelings that swirled between us. The kiss was full of a quiet promise, a tentative step into something new, something neither people may want to are expecting. The night stretched on, filled with shared smiles, whispered words, and unspoken hopes. As we allowed ourselves to be swept up within the moment, the arena outdoor faded away, leaving most effective, the two folks standing together in the quiet darkness, sure by way of a know-how that defied words. And because the first light of sunrise started to interrupt via the home windows, casting a gentle glow over the room, I knew that anything came subsequent, we'd face it collectively, one step at a time. The morning sun changed into casting a tender heat mild over the room once I awakened, the events of the previous night still lingering in my mind. I lay there, watching the shadows shift on the ceiling, feeling a combination of calm and uncertainty settle over me. I hadn't planned for any of this. And yet, right here, we were both of us navigating something that felt like uncharted territory. A area neither of us had anticipated finding ourselves in. I heard footsteps method, after which Caleb became there, standing in the doorway with a hesitant smile. He regarded extra comfy than I might seen him in days, even though there was nonetheless an underlying trace of hysteria in his eyes. We exchanged a quiet appearance, a silent acknowledgement of the whole lot that had took place, as if phrases would somehow dilute the truth of all of it. Morning, he stated softly, moving into the room, his gaze protecting mine with an intensity that made my heart race. Morning, I spoke back, sitting up, feeling an extraordinary sense of calm wash over me. In spite of the complexity of the scenario, I felt grounded, as even though in some way matters had fallen into place. He crossed the room and sat.
Oh, so you only get a little portion of the 25%. Oh, man. 25% of the probably that's mine. But you get only a portion of it. And then they'll pay you back.
They're writing it down. Like, oh, if I get 21 though. And after the house is paid, all the story. Alright, come on.
Headlines.
Sure, buddy. Cool.
Have a good one.
Yeah, you too. One of the three. Emma. The one in the green. Emma. Yeah, Emma. That's my cousin. That's my cousin. I asked Brad to go. Yeah, I think they did. Yeah, it's Emma's house. Speak loud, that kid. Awesome. It looks like a form up.
Yeah, I'm gonna try schooner 3
Have a good one. Yeah, man.
See you, man.
See you guys. See ya.
Yeah, but I'll have to go home to sleep.
Dust in the furniture or something. He can't hear me.
Appeared to consider this, nodding slowly as he processed my words. At some point at a time, he repeated as though trying out the idea. I assume I'm able to take care of that. We sat in comfy silence, every of us misplaced in our own mind. There was something liberating about not having to define what became occurring approximately, permitting ourselves to truly exist within the second, without the strain of labels or expectancies. The rest of the day surpassed quietly, every folks going about our workouts, with a new experience of normalcy. It was as though we would silently agree to let things unfold certainly, without forcing anything. Caleb spent part of the afternoon running on his computer, whilst I took care of some matters across the residence, our paths crossing here and there in a manner that felt surprisingly intimate yet effortless. Later, as evening settled over the residence, we found ourselves sitting together on the back porch, looking as the solar dipped underneath the horizon, casting a warm glow throughout the yard. The silence between us became cozy, filled with the form of ease that best got here from expertise and acceptance. Do you suspect? Caleb began breaking the quiet, his voice considerate. Do you believe you studied matters will constantly be this complicated? I taken into consideration his question, looking for the right words. I suppose lifestyles has a way of throwing matters at us we are not continually ready for, I answered. However, I also think that if something feels right, it's well worth navigating the complications. He nodded, his gaze constant on the fading mild, I guess. So I need to make certain I don't lose this. Something that is, I reached over, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. We're both here, Caleb. That's what subjects. We do not must have all the solutions right now. He looked at me, then his expression, one and all quiet determination. You are right, he said softly. I am simply satisfied we're in this together. As nighttime fell, we stayed outdoors, speak me approximately everything and nothing. Our communication flowing certainly, as we shared bits of ourselves we hadn't before. It was as though this new chapter had opened a door to parts folks we hadn't regarded existed, allowing us to attach on a deeper stage, one which felt each exhilarating and grounding. Eventually the relax of the night air caused us to move again interior, and as we settled in for the nighttime, I felt a sense of contentment settle over me. It became ordinary. However, inside the midst of all of the uncertainty I felt at peace, as although we had discovered a rhythm, a manner of being that felt right. The days that followed have been filled with moments like these, quiet conversations, shared laughter, and an unspoken expertise that had come to define our time collectively. It was as though we had located our own little world, one in which we can be ourselves without worry or hesitation. One evening, as we sat collectively watching a movie, Caleb grew to become to me his expression, considerate. I never imagined things could turn out like this. He stated, his voice gentle. I looked over at him, a small smile tugging at my lips. Neither did I. However, now and again, existence surprises us. He nodded, a faint smile crossing his face. I'm happy it did. It is extraordinary. However, it appears like that is where I am purported to be. His phrases resonated with me, and for a second, I discovered myself unable to respond, crushed by the quiet truth in his voice. It changed into, as even though he had voiced something, I hadn't been capable of articulate, a sense that were building within me, considering that the beginning. We sat in silence, every folks absorbing the burden of his words, the unstated promise that lay between us. It turned into a feeling that went past words, a connection that rejected explanation. And because the night wore on, I found myself filled with a quiet feel of wish, a perception that come what may we would discover our manner. Our time together subsequently began to attract to a close, the days slipping via faster than both of us had expected. There was a bitter weakness to it, a reputation that this chapter become coming to and give up, while a brand new one waited on the horizon. On his ultimate night with us, we sat collectively at the porch watching, because the stars regarded one by one in the night sky. The air became packed with the quiet sounds of the nighttime, the distant hum of crickets mixing with the mild rustle of the trees. This has been sudden. He stated, his voice slightly above a whisper, as even though talking any louder might damage the spell of the instant. I nodded, feeling a lump shape in my throat. Yeah, but I would not exchange it for anything. He checked out me then, his gaze filled with an emotion that became both tender and unwavering. Neither might I. We sat there, aspect by means of facet, letting the silence communicate for us. It became a silence full of the entirety we hadn't stated, a shared understanding that transcended words. And because the night stretched on, I felt the experience of peace settle over me. A quiet confidence that no matter what got here subsequent, we'd bring this with us. While it turned into, in the end, time for him to go away, we exchanged a quiet include, each folks preserving on a second longer than vital. There was a unhappiness within the air, however, also a sense of hope. A notion that somehow we would locate our way return to every different. As he drove away, I stood within the doorway, looking until his automobile disappeared into the space. The house felt emptier without him. However, there has been part of me that felt fuller, a element that were wakened by the point we had shared. I closed the door, a small smile on my face, as I became again into the quiet residence. The reminiscences of those days, those quiet moments filled with laughter, verbal exchange, and an unstated bond, might stay with me, a reminder of the relationship we had discovered and the opportunities that lay ahead.